Hey, welcome to Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. I'm here on a sunny, beautiful afternoon in Fargo. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. There's a lot going on in the community, a lot going on in the world, and we're going to get to most of it, if not all of it. So it's been an interesting week for me. With the assassination attempt of Donald Trump, there was real interesting conversations that I had with friends of mine, and I can tell you honestly, when I heard that it had taken place, immediately in my head I was thinking, oh, please don't be an immigrant, please don't be a person of color. That's immediately what came to my head. Because in my mind I was thinking, what if? How does the scenario play out if it is one of those two people? Well, I think the talking heads, I think the people on the other side of the aisle would have an absolute field day with it. But what's interesting about it is when I talk to some of my friends that are fairly conservative, the first thing out of their mouth was, I wouldn't be surprised if it were an immigrant or an illegal alien. And so I spent this week doing some research. I went to the Deloitte Global Economics Research Center, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, as well as the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI website to find some statistics on crime in general, as well as crimes by immigrants or illegal aliens. And since 2020, crime amongst the groups that I've mentioned has actually gone down. Now, if you're listening on social media, you would believe that the people that are coming into this country are running rampant. And it's sad because all of this information is available, but yet we have people putting it out there like immigrants or illegal aliens are coming into this country and they're creating all of this crime. And so part of my job as a show host is to go and find the information. And so the FBI seems to be a pretty good place to start. The Department of Justice seems to be a pretty good place to start. And what I found really interesting was crime overall was down under Joe Biden. So food for thought, but it's one of those things where, honestly, from my perspective, looking at it, look at the 60s and how many political activists or politicians were killed in the 60s. And we know that in some instances, our government had a direct hand in the assassination of people like Martin Luther King, JFK. Now that's a conspiracy, but the documents show otherwise if you go and look. So then the question becomes, why is everybody so upset? Our government has been killing people around the globe for years, and one person that comes to mind is Muammar Gaddafi. And, it's interesting. He's an interesting case study in international leaders because the premise was that he was dangerous, okay? But now, in retrospect and looking at it 20, 30 years later, we find out that not only wasn't he a dictator, his people had free health care, they had access to education and jobs, and he was trying to get Libya off the gold standard, okay? And that would create a host of problems for the United States as well as our allies. But the single biggest thing is he wanted to unite the countries of Africa, to create a United States of Africa, if you will. And that's why he was assassinated. And so when I look at this, about 2.5 months ago, whenever Donald Trump was going through his struggles with the legal system, he came out and he said that we identify with his struggles because we have been demonized in the court system for years. So the blacks understand, what I'm going through, and they identify that's why they support me. Well, it seems to me that he's continuing right along the line, if that is the case, because a lot of our leaders were killed in the 60s, and now they've attempted to do the same to him in 2024. So now the question becomes, what do we do with this information? Malcolm X once said at the assassination of John F. Kennedy that the chickens have come home to roost. And so the question has to be asked, why did this take place? And conspiracy theorists now are saying, it might have been an inside job. How could the Secret Service fail so bad at their job in protecting the president? And I got to tell you honestly, I wonder. It makes you wonder, was there government involvement? How can that guy be where he was and them not act? I mean, what did they say? They knew about him for 3 or 4 minutes. And then the sniper who eventually lost his job that actually took the shot, they said he disobeyed a direct order. So along the lines of we need to pay attention to our government, it's like these are questions that need to be asked, because I may not be a Trump supporter, but I also don't advocate taking out political opponents, because it sets a very, very dangerous precedent, okay? This puts us in a very precarious position, because if Donald Trump can be targeted, that means anybody can be targeted, okay? And once we start down this pathway, now the rights that we so freely enjoy, they can be eroded. And it's a very subtle thing, and it happens in increments. Now, the conspiracy theory in me says COVID was a test run to see how much U.S. citizens would put up with. Okay? I think it was a test run to see how far can we push citizens before they actually band together and revolt. Because that's the single biggest thing. If we ever figure out that we don't need to be Republicans and Democrats or conservatives or Republicans, if we ever figure out that we just need to be good people and band together and elect good people, the powers that be know that they are in trouble. And I've said it before, I think that's the divisiveness. That's why we see all of these things constantly that we're bombarded with, that they seek to divide us. And so at some point, we've got to take the labels off. We've got to look at what's good for us as a nation. And I can tell you right now, to me, what's good for the nation as far as the government is concerned is big business, is special interests, and it's the retention of power. Okay? We know that because we've had a number of different presidents, but it all ends up the same way. The everyday person feels whatever's going on. Okay? We printed $41 trillion during COVID, right? We're all feeling the pinch of that. But it couldn't happen without Republicans and Democrats getting on board. So when they start pointing the finger at, well, why didn't Donald Trump do this, or he handled it poorly? I have to ask, why didn't you do more to make sure he handled it correctly? Okay? And they can make all the excuses they want, but we know when they want to get things done, they get it done. It's been shown time and time again. When Trump decided that he was going to deal with China's trade imbalance, he went hard at them, and then we gave the farmers a bailout, which subsequently went to big corporations. And so it's like, all right, when they want to get stuff done, they get it done. But when it's in regard to ordinary citizens, there's feet dragging, okay? There's never enough money. I mean, I'm glad Joe Biden signed the infrastructure bill because guess what? It's needed. It's needed, especially if we're going to go green. We cannot go green with our current electrical grid. Remember the blackout in Texas 3-4 years ago? All of these things. So I don't have much more to say on the assassination because personally, for me, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked at all. And I'm not saying that, let's put it this way. Donald Trump is a lightning rod. He's a lightning rod within his own party. He's a lightning rod to people that don't like him. Okay? I mean, that's a fact. And so here you have a young man, and from all accounts, he identified as Republican. How did he go from supporting the Republican Party to thinking it's a good idea to take a shot at Donald Trump? All questions. We won't know the answers because, of course, he's dead. But these are things we got to think about. And so then we also have to think about how bad off do you have to be that you decide you want to take out a presidential candidate. I mean, I haven't heard anybody really address that, you know? I mean, his family's been quiet, and I couldn't imagine what his family's going through, but these are all questions that, and you know what? I shouldn't be surprised because we have these questions about school shooters, the mass shooters. We talk about crime in Chicago. We have all these answers, and it's all the same thing. I wonder why. Well, for a lot of people, life is hard right now, okay? And so, you know, I'm not giving this kid a pass, but not by any means. But I would love to know where did he go from where he was 3 years ago to now. So that's part of the show. That's one thing I wanted to talk about. I think it's already been talked about ad nauseum, but for me, it's just another Wednesday. It's just another Wednesday. You know, that's a tragic event. You know. The guy looks like he's making a speedy recovery, and he's going to push forward. But coming up in our next segment, there has been a document, and I've talked about it the past 3 weeks. It's called Project 2025. And I'm going to tell you, if you have not read it, you might want to take a peek at it. So when we come back, we're going to talk Project 2025. We're off and running. This is Jon Adams for Talk of the Town. If you want to call in, the phone number is 701-293-9000. Welcome back to Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. It would appear the big game, James. He's on his music game today. Thank you for that. So first, I got to do a little house cleaning. I want to give a shout out to my sister. It's her birthday. Well, it was her birthday. Happy birthday, sis. And also my longtime friend, Charles Hinton, or the Prince as he's known in certain circles. Happy birthday, young man. Anyway, let's get back to Project 2025. So first I have to lay the groundwork. Project 2025 is an agenda set forth by the conservative right. At this point, looking at it, I would call it radical. I would call it radical because some of the points that are laid out in this agenda, in this project, specifically speak to leading people down a certain direction, polarizing power in one direction, okay? That is a very dangerous thing. And as we go through some of the highlights, first of all, the document is only 920 pages, but I would encourage you, get online. You got to get online and you got to read this, because if this comes to pass, understand that it doesn't affect the target audience, it affects everyone. And the problem with the Project 25 is that it takes the power out of the hands of the people. And it's very subtle, but once it happens, the way it's laid out, it's going to be very difficult to change it, okay? It's going to be very difficult to change it, and it is going to affect you regardless of what side of the aisle you are on, all right? If you think that big business runs this country now, it will be absolute if Project 2025 is enacted. So, first of all, how did this document come to existence? I don't know if you're familiar with the Heritage Foundation, but they're a conservative think tank in the way that George Soros has his liberal think tank, okay? So their angle is not necessarily centric. It is catering to the right in a conservative way, okay? And so what they've done is they said after the election of Joe Biden, and I think it also had to do with the election of Obama, 2025 lays out a concrete blueprint of how to grab power and how to control your citizenry in a way that we've never seen before. And so one of the things is that they say that they advocate for policies and ideas and policymakers to be able to do their job. So one of their premises is that when Trump was in office, he tried to get things done and there were people that opposed him, okay? And that they were stagnant in doing what they were supposed to do, in his eyes. And so this conservative think tank says, we don't want that. We want the president's ideas and policies to go through. We want them to be able to be enacted. That's not democracy. If people don't agree, if people in government don't agree with the president, they need to be able to have a remedy for it. And usually it's judicially, okay? It's legislatively. But what I find interesting is that during the 8 years that Obama was president, the very thing that they're talking about happened day after day after day. But there was no agenda. There was no Project 25. They didn't roll out this document, okay? But they're rolling out this document because they feel like Donald Trump is going to win, okay? And because he will be a lame duck president, they want him to be able to do whatever he deems necessary to do. That's very dangerous. There's a reason that we have a legislative branch and a judicial branch, okay? Secondly, they espouse conservative principles, okay? Now, it's funny because they say traditional values and a strong national defense. I don't think anybody, first of all, has a lock on traditional values. Certainly not the Heritage Foundation. And let me explain. They advocate for a strong family, yet the person that they want to be president hasn't displayed those type of values morally. Okay? He hasn't, from all accounts and what I've read, I don't know if I've ever seen the guy pray in public. I don't think I've ever heard him mention any sort of spirituality in a way that makes me to believe that he actually follows the tenets of what's written in the Bible as well as Christianity. Okay? And I could be wrong, but I'm just saying, if you're telling me that you want to uphold traditional values, okay, meaning a strong family unit, meaning doing things the right way, meaning being a good person, all right? To me, there's not much evidence that this is the guy that should be doing this, that you should be supporting, okay? Number two, influence. The Heritage Foundation they often influence conservative lawmakers and administrations in shaping legislative agendas and policies. Now, it's interesting. I talked about it a little bit last week. They think that unions are bad for our country. And now this is going to require a little research. I want you to go back and look through your history and see what happened before we had unions and before we had labor laws. Okay? They want to restrict the reach of unions. Now, once you start with restricting, if you follow the path, it will go from restricting to eventually not having any power at all, or any tooth to whatever you're trying to accomplish, any teeth, sorry. So those two things alone, my ears are really perked up, because you think about it. If your boss has the ability to fire you without cause, or they have the ability to artificially hold wages down and not keep up with the cost of living, which, by the way, is a reality right now, who does that affect? Okay? The wage gap in the United States is already widened. Okay? It got even wider under Trump. Okay? So, people that are going to work and working hard every day, they're taking home less. And so these are the things that it's in this document. And I'm amazed because they're not even trying to hide it now. They're putting it out there for you to see. Okay? So that there's no misunderstanding what they want to do. So I would encourage you guys, look at this document and say, hey, wait a minute. Forget the overarching picture. What I want you to do is I want you to look at it and say, how is this going to affect my kids? So we're up against the break. When we come back, I'm going to continue with Agenda 2025 because that's just the tip of the iceberg. This is Jon Adams for WDAY Radio. If you want to call in, the phone number is 701-293-9000. Welcome back to Talk of the Town with Jon Adams. We've been talking Project 2020. We've been talking Project 2025. Like, I got a bunch of people in the studio. It's just me. So I'm as I'm going through my show notes, there's an overriding theme that it just hits home for me. And it's all about what will happen to the citizens of this country if Project 2025 is enacted. And so as I went through, there was, when you have an ideological shift in government, okay, particularly when it comes to conservative policy, it doesn't leave leeway for people on the other side, okay? And it eliminates checks and balances. So a perfect example is, look at what the Supreme Court did with presidential immunity. So if you're acting in a official capacity as the President of the United States, you can't be prosecuted. So this is the devil's advocate portion of the show. So in the 60s, we knew that J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI and the CIA systematically eliminated most of the civil rights leaders of the 60s, okay? If Joe Biden gave that directive today, who could he eliminate? And the question is, would he be prosecuted with the immunity that's in place? It's scary because it reminds me of the Nuremberg trials. And when they were talking to the Nazi lieutenants and generals, their classic line was, "We were just following orders." Okay? So now, let's say that Joe gets a wild hair and he determines that the Proud Boys are a terrorist group and they need to be neutralized. Okay? Whether it's constitutional or not, even if he breaks the law, with the Supreme Court decision, I think he gets immunity. So now if the person that occupies a seat as the most powerful man in the world can't be prosecuted, but yet he can order people to act in an unscrupulous manner with no checks and balances, where does that leave the people of the United States? Okay? And by all accounts, Trump's political base is not rich and wealthy. That's a good portion, but an even bigger portion are marginalized people. You look at the South in particular. We're all red states. By the way, red states are taking a beating, but that's another show for another day. But I want you to think about this. So now this guy has the ability to label certain groups terrorist groups, domestic terrorists. And if he wants to neutralize them, he can do that, and he's not going to be prosecuted because of what the Supreme Court has done. So the Heritage Foundation, in their thinking, says we want a leader and we want a system that allows us to maintain a conservative view. And for me, I think the court's decision was way out of bounds. Nobody should be above the law, but yet they ruled that, the president has immunity when acting in official capacity. If that doesn't scare you, it should, okay? One of the other things that we also have is the ability to know, all right? Under Project 2025, the lack of transparency will become very evident very fast. Okay? Because now you have everybody that's aligned with whoever's in power, and let's just say the president, okay? We don't even have to say Donald Trump or Joe Biden. So whoever gets in, he's going to have absolute power. That's not what the founding fathers wanted at all. Okay? That's not what the Declaration of Independence was about. Okay? Project 2025, when it comes to social policies, it's going to wreck shop across the board. Okay? It will provide limited funds on the social level. Now, it's funny, most of the time we think of welfare recipients and this and that, but think about people that have served our country. It's funny how people are so quick to get rid of DEI, but one of the best resources that veterans have to get the things that they need or have somebody advocate for them is DEI. You know, vulnerable people in the community, old people in the community, handicapped people in the community. I don't know if handicap is the correct term. I apologize if it's not. They're all covered under the umbrella of DEI, yet they're going to seek to eliminate that. So when I hear people say I'm not in favor of DEI, I really question their patriotism because they're talking about the veterans. Okay? They're talking about people that have fought and served this country, and they act like DEI is only serving minorities or special interest groups, but it's bigger than that. But yet you hear them saying all the time, I don't want that. Well, why wouldn't you want to take care of the people that fought not only for your political life, but for the lives that we all live in the United States? So, you know, hey, I'm just a messenger. We've already seen an erosion of civil liberties in this country. Along with employment liberties, civil liberties are going to be greatly affected under Project 2025 also. Okay? And the funny thing is, when I read this, I was like, this is an amazing document. But then when I started researching each one of these points, I realized that you can talk about everything you want to do for the citizenry, but at the end of the day, the problem that we have is that the citizenry will be affected in a way that they couldn't possibly imagine. Imagine if you go into your boss's, you go and ask your boss for a raise and he can dismiss you on the spot. Okay? Imagine that you've been at a company for quite some time and they decide that they're going to choose profit over profitability. That's happening right now. I've got friends of mine who were downsized, other people that were just simply let go. Okay? I'm gonna detour a little bit because it brings up a point about taxes. Okay? So in 2017, we had the Trump tax plan. Okay? And the vast majority of that tax plan benefited the wealthy. Again, contributing to the wage gap. Okay? Now that it's done, taxes are going up for the next 5 years under the Donald Trump tax plan. So along with the inflation that was created with the money that was printed from COVID, now your taxes are going up. Okay, that didn't happen under a Democratic president. So these are the things that we got to look at and say, hey, look, you know, these are all facts. Okay? At the beginning, I gave you the sources that I use when I come on the air and I talk about it. And all of them you would have to deem reputable. Okay? They're all government entities. These numbers exist. You can't change them. You can't fudge them. Okay? These aren't these aren't groups that are think tanks that have the interest of one side or the other when they speak. These are people that are just giving the information. So, you know, whether you're a Trump supporter or you're not, or you're liberal or you're well, if you're conservative, you love the idea. But I'm telling you, even as a conservative, I have some issues with this. Okay? I have some deep-seated issues with this. So, what do we do with all this information? What we do is we get out and we voice our opinion, you know? And when we have leaders in our local government that are saying these things that sound like Project 2025, like it's a good idea, we need to challenge them, okay? We need to start being involved because I think we are at the most pivotal time in our country's history, a time when the world will forever be changed come November. All right. I wanted to touch on, I've heard a lot of people complain about Joe Biden's economy and Joe Biden's this and that. So, I got some numbers for you. Oh, Big Game James says we're up against the break. When I come back, I'm going to give you some economic statistics, okay, in regard to the Joe Biden economy that may be startling to you, considering that all of the media is saying that it's been a disaster. This is Jon Adams. If you want to call in, the phone number is 701-293-9000. Welcome back to Talk of the Town for the final segment of the radio show. I appreciate you guys tuning in. It's been an interesting show. Typically, I don't go way deep into politics, but in this instance, the more that I read Project 2025 as well as Agenda 47, it's got the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I ain't got much hair. I got a haircut the other day. I got a haircut this morning. But anyway, I want to continue on. I said I was going to talk about Joe Biden's economy, but I'm not going to talk about it, number one, because I didn't get to Agenda 47, and I've got roughly 7 minutes to cover that. Now, Agenda 47 is actually what Trump intends to do with his second term in office, okay? For 47 stands for 47 president, by the way. So the key aspects of Agenda 47 is tax cuts, okay? That's the economic policies, tax cuts. So I briefly touched on it last time, but the tax cuts in 2027, I'm sorry. There's no way you can look at it and say it was a win for the American people. Not looking at it in totality, not looking at the fact that we pushed ourselves into the inflation that we have now, okay? If they would have been permanent, I would have said, hey, this isn't bad. But it wasn't, and now people are seeing their taxes go up on top of inflation, which, by the way, is slowing, and they say that the Fed is actually going to cut rates in September. But it's funny because if you look at the economic indicators, they could have cut taxes they could have cut interest rates this month, which would have been far more beneficial for us. But by cutting them in September, it makes everything look rosy come November, okay? Remember, I talked about it many a time on this show. The manipulation of our economy and of our lives plays out a year and a half before any major election. And if you go back through history, you'll find that that bears out. So anyway, deregulation. Right now, we're going through it in the housing market again. Okay, you look at interest rates. You look at what is happening when it comes to money and finances. Okay, the Trump administration rolled back a lot of the regulations that were in place or put in place under Obama. I was amazed that when this guy came in the office, people voted against their best interests because we all need money at one time or another. And rolling back and allowing banks and financial institutions to do things that they shouldn't be doing with no checks and balances, that's crazy. That's how we got into 2007, 2008. So as far as deregulation goes, that gets an from me, okay? As far as trade policies go, I'm on the fence with Donald Trump on trade policies because I thought his ideas made sense. I thought his implementation was terrible, okay? He cost farmers their job. Most people don't talk about the fact that we had a bailout under Trump because of his trade policies. So I would say that's something that we really have to take a hard look at when we look at Agenda 27. Then there's immigration, healthcare, foreign policy, judicial appointments. I've already covered that. Education and environmental policies. So every aspect of your life, Trump has a plan for. Now, if you're like me, I want to know what the plan is. I'm getting close to retirement, okay? And for a long time, I've heard the scuttlebutt that now they want to tax retirement. They've got plans to cut Social Security, all these different things. And I'm at the age where I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I've been paying in my whole life, and now all of a sudden, the funny thing is, if you look at what you paid in and how you get it back, you'll never get all your money back before you die. It's the greatest Ponzi scheme on the planet. But you know what? It's better than nothing. You know, there are some countries that don't take care of their citizens at all. So, you know, the healthcare thing, we're an aging society. Our baby boomers are coming to age where healthcare is vitally important. Okay? And I believe that Donald Trump, during his presidency, said he would roll out a health care bill that would be better than Obamacare. I haven't seen it. So when I look at Donald Trump and his presidency in its entirety, there are a lot of holes. And I wonder what happened to accountability of our political leaders. What happened to, hey, if you are the most powerful person in the world, shouldn't you be looking out for your citizenry? The one great thing that I like about Donald Trump is his protectionist attitude, okay? I've always said America first, and I believe that we have to do that. We have to take care of our citizens first. And when you're giving money to Israel and you're giving money to the Ukraine, I have a problem with that. Not when I get phone calls from people that need help, okay? Not when I have friends whose businesses went under because there weren't the resources that they needed. The fact that our infrastructure isn't where it should be, but hats off to Joe Biden for attempting to fix it. Now, when I talk about the future, I talk about our kids. And right here, education, he wants to do away with the Department of Education. Now, I'll be the first to say we definitely have some issues in our education system, okay? But if you're going to say you're going to do away with it, I need to know what that means. I don't have any kids that are a part of the education system, but if we're talking about the future of the United States and we're talking about kids, you dang well got to have a plan. You can't say you're going to eliminate it because it's inefficient or it doesn't work without a plan. And so for me, when I look at it on its face, as Americans, we got a lot to do. And it all falls squarely on us, you know? And come November, if you don't get out and vote, you're going to look back at this show and go, well, geez, that guy with the fourth grade education, he said as much. You know, we have the ability to know anything we want to know at a moment's notice. We keep our phone with us 24/7. We need to start educating ourselves in the right way. We need to pay attention to what our federal government's doing. We need to pay attention to what our local politicians are doing, because local governments are microcosms of our federal government. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to say, look, I don't claim to know everything, okay, but I do try to do my research so that I can bring you guys the information so you can make an informed buying decision. But I would encourage you guys, hey, you know what? When you're sitting down at the lake or you're hanging out with friends, have that dialogue. You know, let's talk about it. Because if these conservative policies come into play, I can tell you that civil liberties are going to be affected as well. This is Jon Adams. This has been Talk of the Town. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week. I'm going to have on someone from the S5 Project. And as always, stay black.